Welcome back to the window. Romario Webster here, and this is talkSPORT's daily transfer show where we bring you the latest deals, news, and rumours from the window. Joining me today is sports broadcaster and talkSPORT reporter Anil Kandola. Anil, my friend, how are you? All good?
I'm very well, thank you, Romario. Pleasure to join you. I'm a big fan of your work, I must admit. And like I said before, we click record today. It's been such a brilliant transfer window. It's genuinely, for me anyway, I've been covering transfer windows now for a number of years. But for me, this has been one of the all-timers. So many deals, so much money being spent, and so many big names being linked with moves in and out of the Premier League. So yeah, with just a few weeks left, I'm sure we're in for a barnstormer of an ending as well.
There is only one place to start. That is with your club, Manchester United. Benjamin Sesko has been rumoured to be joining the Premier League. It was initially Arsenal. They signed Victor Gyökeres. It looks like it is destination Manchester United. What's the latest with that deal, Anil?
Yeah, Romario, I think there's a level of irony here, given the fact that Manchester United really wanted Victor Gyökeres at the start of the window and Arsenal really wanted Benjamin Sesko at the start of the window. Come that first Premier League game, which of course will be covered on talkSPORT, the players will be playing for the opposite teams. That's the beauty of the transfer window. Things change, things pivot. And as you've already alluded to, of course, Victor Gyökeres has found his new home. And we do understand here at talkSPORT that Benjamin Sesko is on the verge of finding his new home. As of today, as of the day of recording, Romario, in terms of the lead up to where we are now, two bids from Newcastle went in. Of course, the first one was rejected. The second one did certainly appeal to RB Leipzig, but of course, because of the way Benjamin Sesko has handled the situation, one of his main priorities not only was to find a new club and a new project, but also to remain very respectful to his current club. Of course, that was the platform to really allow him to be recognised on the European and potentially global stage as well. So because of that respect element, Benjamin Sesko has been able to have a say. And it was my understanding at the start of last week that his preference was a move to Old Trafford. We have saw that really ramp up in the last few days. Of course, that bid went in for the player from Manchester United. And as of today, as I've already said, this seems to be exactly where Manchester United fans want. Personal terms were agreed yesterday, and he will train separately from the RB Leipzig club, not in terms of an Isak situation, which I'm sure we'll get a chance to speak about a little bit later. But out of respect, he's ready to fly for his medical, so he's just waiting for the fine line of the paperwork to be all confirmed, and he will be on his way to Manchester to complete that medical. So yeah, barring an absolutely crazy turn of events, which of course is always open with the transfer window. But my suggestion and everything we're hearing here at talkSPORT is Benjamin Sesko. It's a matter of when and not if he will be a Manchester United player.
Well, you say there it's a matter of when and not if. Could it be before that huge opening Premier League game against Arsenal at Old Trafford next Sunday, which is, of course, on talkSPORT? Could he be across the line for that game?
Well, the short answer for you, Mario, is yes. There's a massive chance he could be at the very minimum within the squad. Of course, I think in an ideal world, not just with Benjamin Sesko, but for any new player, for any team, ideally they would like them players to come in for pre-season or at the minimum at pre-season to really bed them in and potentially prevent that possibility of the first game they play with their new teammates is in a game that is of a competitive nature. But look, big deals take time, and my understanding anyway is I did hear a certain date in terms of when Manchester United would like this deal to be wrapped up, and that is at the start of next week. So I do personally expect this deal to be, in terms of a significant confirmation, if you like, I do think we're on the verge of that over the next couple of days. If it isn't today, we will get that official confirmation that Benjamin Sesko not only has chosen Manchester United, but he's going to join Manchester United.
And I'm not sure if you can shed any light on the forwards currently at Manchester United, Rasmus Højlund, Joshua Zirkzee. How does this affect their futures at the club?
Yeah, I think it's an interesting one, especially when you consider and you date back to that moment where Joshua Zirkzee was substituted against, I think it was Newcastle. A little bit of irony there, considering where Benjamin Sesko is going. But he was actually booed off the pitch that day in front of Old Trafford, the 75,000 fans. No player deserves that, within reason, of course. And for him to change his career around now in terms of even being accepted by the Manchester United fans is a massive testament to him. It's my understanding that Manchester United have no interest whatsoever in even entertaining any interest within the individual, but that isn't quite the case for Rasmus Højlund. Now, of course, we learned in the past week or so, coming from the horse's mouth, if you like, he says that he wants to fight for his place. He says that this is the club for him and he wants to prove he is able to put on the famous shirt of Manchester United and really hold up the standards, as we've seen, in history, maybe not modern history, but over the years, we've seen that a forward line requires big players. But of course, with Benjamin Sesko inevitably going to come through the door, it does raise questions. There has been, in the last few weeks, interest from Italy. The likes of Inter Milan and AC Milan have also been interested in terms of acquiring the services of the player. I think it's a known fact that Manchester United will have to take a big hit financially. Of course, they signed the player for north of 70 million. I think they'll be lucky to get half that, given the circumstances around him, which is a sorry situation. But at the end of the day, if that's going to benefit his career, which I do believe it will, I'm not sure how he recovers from such a torrid time at Manchester United, then ultimately it will look like a move away. But in terms of a wider aspect, Romario, not just necessarily with Højlund, but also all of the players that are on, this in inverted commas, the bomb squad, the players who are surplus to requirements at Manchester United. It is my understanding that the method to Ineos's transfer window is to get the players in and then almost worry about the sales after. And I think that's a bit of a dangerous game to play. I know we will almost certainly touch on a certain Garnacho, which will tie in what I'm about to say. But it's a risky game because if teams across Europe know that you're needing of finances when it comes to balancing the books, when it comes to, FFP and PSR and all that kind of stuff, they will exploit that, and rightly so. They'll take advantage knowing that Man United need any money they can get their hands on. So it's a risky move, I guess, on one aspect, but from a fan perspective, they'll be over the moon with such busy business in terms of incomings because, of course, after a dismal season last season, they certainly need some new faces.
Yeah, no, it's interesting you touched on it there that, other clubs know that you require the money. Chelsea have actually been very impressive to offload as many players as they have, considering the business they've already done. We'll touch on Chelsea shortly. Another potential incoming at Manchester United is Brighton's Carlos Baleba. Brighton have done it again. They've got another top player on their books who the big clubs are looking at. What are the chances of this being done in this window? I know there's been reports that Brighton don't want to sell him. What's the chances and what sort of fee would it require?
Yeah, of course. I think Brighton are well within their rights to say they don't want to sell, but I always have the mantra when it comes to the transfer window, everyone's to sell for the right price. There's always going to be a number that will pique the interest. And we've saw that with Brighton, the likes of Moses Caicedo in recent history in a very similar position to Baleba. They don't want to sell these players, but they ultimately understand that they are a selling club in order for their model to work. And it's a brilliant model. You can't knock the way that Brighton run their operations when it comes to sales. Certainly, they just seem to have that magic touch in finding these uncovered gems and making them into superstars by allowing the platform of playing consistent Premier League football. But of course, with Carlos Baleba, it's quite funny, Romario, because I've been seeing for the past few weeks, before any links or any concrete information was coming out of anywhere, there was so many Man United fans desperate for this individual to come in. They think this is the perfect profile of midfielder, and it seems not necessarily that they've got their wish, but it seems as if Ineos have heard that, and they've also not only heard the interest, but they seem to be moving on it. There was reports yesterday, which I also am in the understanding that through intermediates, it wasn't necessarily direct club to club talks, because of course the way Manchester United operate in this window is they don't want to enter official negotiations of that regard until they have significant interest regarding the player as well. They want a bit of evidence, if you like, to really push forward. But yeah, this is one certainly to watch out for. It is my understanding that, very similar to the Caicedo deal, Brighton will slap a £100 million nice and round figure for them to get in terms of selling him. Of course, still young. But Manchester United, I was told last night, they see Baleba as the dream midfield signing. They are going to, I think, in the coming days, really find out how possible this deal is. But of course, we're running out of time. Do they want to sell with little time to find adequate replacements? Of course, they don't necessarily spend that much, but they will need a bit of time. But look, sources close to the situation and the individuals who've told me that Baleba is open to certainly hearing the negotiation side from Manchester United. So one to watch out for. Whether or not it's a bit too late to secure in this summer, we remain to be seen. But yes, a midfielder and also a goalkeeper is certainly still on the radar for Manchester United.
Well, perfect segue, Anil. Goalkeeper was the next position I was going to ask you about. We've seen Aston Villa's Emi Martinez linked. PSG's Gianluigi Donnarumma looks like he won't be signing a new contract at the Paris club. Are Manchester United in for either of those two? And can they even afford to sign a top goalkeeper after those signings that we've just spoken about?
Yeah, I think there's interest. I think both players, respectively, have admirers within the Manchester United hierarchy. But as you've already alluded to be able to fork out 40, 50 million for a first choice goalkeeper when it doesn't seem like Onana is going to be going anywhere, especially the fact that he's got this injury now as well, that will take him well into the season at the very minimum in terms of, being able to even pass a medical. It's a situation where it seems that he's going to be staying. I think that's a very known fact amongst the potential suitors for Onana, which then opens the door. Of course, it closes the door on, unfortunately, the likes of the individuals that you've named, Donnarumma and Martinez. But it does open the door to an idea of bringing a number two in. Now, before I give the name that I do think Manchester United will really pursue once the Sesko deal is all and confirmed, this will open the door for the number two to have an opportunity. We saw last season with Onana when he wasn't playing too well that Bayinda did get his opportunity, albeit he didn't really impress by any stretch of the imagination, but nevertheless he did get that opportunity. So the name that I'm hearing is the Antwerp goalkeeper, Sen Lemans. He's a 23-year-old goalkeeper, still young, but as I said, they do look at potentially bringing in a number two that could take the opportunity and really blossom into that number one eventually. It will be a cut price deal. It will be less than around 20 million, closer to probably 15 million pounds in order to get this goalkeeper in. And I think to see a fresh face in such a difficult position for Manchester United will be welcome. So I would say, out of all of the names that we've spoken about and all the names you're potentially hearing, if you're going to take my advice, I think Le Mans is the name to look out for after Benjamin Sesko is confirmed for Manchester United.
All right, now that's enough about Manchester United buying players. Still not sure how they've managed it, but they do need some outgoings, as you have mentioned, Anil. Is there any movement on Alejandro Garnacho to Chelsea? Seems like Chelsea can't get enough wingers at the minute.
Yeah, clearly it's their flavour of the month, isn't it, Romario? Spend all of their cash on wingers and inside forwards and all that kind of stuff. But yes, Chelsea's interest in Alejandro Garnacho dates back to the start of the year. They were interested in potentially bringing in very late in the January transfer window, but Manchester United, I was told, they wanted north of £50 million in January. Of course, that was when Garnacho was fully involved in the setup. He was a part of the squad and getting a lot of minutes. Now, of course, we all know how the situation with Ruben Amorim after the Europa League final unfolded. The reports I'm understanding were very accurate when the quotes came out that Amorim said something along the lines of, "You better pray to God that someone comes in for you because your time here is done." I'm not exactly sure if they were the exact words, but I was told it was very close to a statement of that sort and that magnitude. So yes, in terms of your question, there was always interest, but we do have a fresh update today. Ben Jacobs and Alex Crocaci, football correspondent, have been right across this story. I spoke to them just before I joined you today, Romario, and Chelsea have opened initial talks for Garnacho. The player is very interested in not only in Chelsea, but also to remain in the Premier League. Manchester United, like I've already said, they have dropped that admired fee of 50 million to 40 million. But as I was already saying to you a little bit ago, Romario, Chelsea feel that the price will drop once the Sesko deal is confirmed. And that is because they know that Manchester United need to recoup some of that money. So, like I've already said, it's a bit of a risky play to make when clubs know that your sellable assets can be at a cut price. So, as I say, risky strategy. But in terms of Chelsea, in terms of another winger, it seems like Alejandro Garnacho is certainly piquing the interest of Enzo Maresca.
I mean, two more wingers Manchester United will be looking to get off the books are Antony and Jadon Sancho. We saw Antony actually have quite a good season with Real Betis getting to the Conference League final, albeit losing. Jadon Sancho winning that Conference League final with Chelsea. It's a bit of a shame that they haven't worked out at Manchester United, but it does look like they'll be leaving. Is there any movement on their futures?
Yeah, it is for sure in terms of a disappointment. Both of them came in not only with big price tags, but big eyes on them. Both of them. I think more so potentially Jadon Sancho, of course, with his English ties, had a real element of excitement around him. Antony with the price tag, and Eric Ten Hag really going out on a limb to say, no, 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 this is my player. I know what he's capable of. I think for different reasons they haven't worked out at Manchester United. I don't think anyone could ever criticise Antony's application on and off the field. He carried himself as a true professional, even when the times got difficult. I think with Jadon Sancho, it was, without me holding back, it was the polar opposite. I think his off-field antics and the fact that he basically disrespected both managers that he was under tells a lot in terms of where his career at Manchester United is. But in regards to a potential moving on, the big stumbling block and the problem for Sancho is he doesn't want to take a wage cut. And I understand that. Look, we're all employees of a certain business who pay our wages and all of that kind of stuff. So I can understand from one aspect. But then also, you're a footballer, you want to make the most out of your career. And with a World Cup coming up, I'm not suggesting for a second that Sancho will make it into that squad, but at least put your name in the hat. At least, make yourself available and knock on the door of Thomas Tuchel. But it doesn't seem he's interested in that. He really wants to maintain the wages that he's on at the moment. Of course, only 1 year left on his contract, so I think he's in a position where he's happy to sit in the reserves or be in that bomb squad, if you like, for another season and make as much money as he can. With Antony, it's a bit of a different scenario. He is willing to take a pay cut. I was hearing a bit of information quite some time ago now that he is willing to take up to 30% of a wage cut, which shows that his aspiration is to really play his football. Real Betis are interested, but they want to get him on a loan with a potential obligation to buy. But Manchester United, of course, need the money and need it quite fast. So that's why that one seems to be stalling as well. But I do expect in the final week, I know it's very risky, as I've already said, but I think in the final week, once Manchester United get one or two more players in after Benjamin Sesko, they will really push to try and get them players off the book. So yeah, certainly one to watch out for. But in terms of them outgoings, Romario, I think that's probably one for the very latter stages of the transfer window.
Well, guys, you can keep across Manchester United's transfer business across talkSPORT, wherever you get your content online or on radio. Moving away from Manchester United, we can't leave today without discussing Newcastle's Alexander Isak. We know he's of interest to Liverpool and he wants to move to Liverpool. Eddie Howe has banished him from training with the first team squad, albeit he is back in training, but he is training alone. Is there any movement on that, Anil? Can we see that deal being done before the start of the season, or is this looking like a bit of a deadline day special?
Oh, don't tempt me with a good time, Romario. If this one goes through to deadline day, we're going to be very busy right here on talkSPORT. But yeah, there's nothing more telling than when a player gets banned not only from training but also from the barbecue, the team barbecue. Isak didn't quite get the invite, which speaks volumes. If you're not offered a hot dog or a burger with the team, it seems that you're surplus to requirements as well. But look, joke aside, as you've already said, the factor that Eddie Howe has been the spearhead, if you like, in terms of Isak training alone, it shows he's trying to take control of the situation. Isak is still pushing to leave, is my understanding, and there is acceptance within Newcastle. There were reports coming out within the last 24 hours that he has an ultimatum to make. Either he extends his contract at Newcastle or he does have to go. There's no middle ground. But the problem from Newcastle's perspective, I don't necessarily think it's the fact that they want him to stay. Of course they do. But the real reason why they're not letting him go just yet is because they're very desperate to get in a replacement. And now I think the reason behind that is because, of course, they make a British record fee of approximately around 150 million. A lot of teams are going to know they've got a bit of money to play with. So I think they're desperate to get that over the line, but still brief parts of the media. No, Isak's not for sale. That's nothing to do with the potential purchase we're trying to make now, which then leads me on to what they're trying to do with a certain Nicolas Jackson. I think there is an element of frustration, if I'm being honest, amongst Newcastle fans to go from Alexander Isak to Nicolas Jackson. I don't think that's any disrespect to Jackson, but Isak's on a whole different planet, probably to most strikers out there. So it's nothing personal on Jackson. But initial talks have taken place. Chelsea are prepared to sanction an exit for the striker. Of course, they've brought in Liam Delap and also João Pedro as well, so he can obviously play in that position also. And Newcastle were fully focused on Benjamin Sesko, but they are also in the understanding that he is swaying towards Manchester United. So they are considering a fresh approach for a different player. Chelsea value Jackson. You ready for this? At a whopping £80 million. Now, of course, when you have a lot of cards in terms of the negotiations, you've got the player. You know that the team that wanted to buy are almost certainly going to make a bit of money. There's no wall that's going to be pulled over the eyes of Todd Bowley and the people at Chelsea. So I think they will get a very, very high fee for this potential sale. But if it's going to be 80 million, I'm not so sure. Newcastle will try their best to get that down. But in terms of Isak, you know, Romario, I've always been in the thought process. I think this deal will happen, irrespective of if they do sign a new striker. Like I've already said, money talks, Romario. Money will always be the deciding and driving factor, especially within the transfer window. So if Liverpool, which they already have, making so much money, of course, Darwin Núñez is all but completed that move to Saudi Arabia. They will have money to play with, and if they put down, let's just say for argument's sake, 150 million, how many clubs will say no to a fee like that, even for a player like Isak? So yeah, if you're going to ask me if I was a betting man, Romario, I'll say that I do see Isak being Liverpool's new striker.